Welcome back to the POPcast.
Since VG, because he's at a video shoot today, so we have to excuse him.
Yes. But we do have a special guest who's joining us for this episode for today. It's our first guest that we've actually had on the podcast, so shout out. We've got Zamo Mbele who's with us. He is a clinical psychologist. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Are you keen to get involved in the chat?
Kancane nje.
Or Yazawa?
Hayi ngicela.
Thanks for making time, Fetty.
Thank you.
Yes,
No, of course.
thank you so much for coming through. Okay, so I felt it was very important for us to have this conversation, especially after things kind of got hot and heavy on the timeline in the past 2 weeks. Obviously, the news about Uyinene Mkhoityana came through, and women in South Africa were obviously feeling unsafe. They were bewildered by what actually happened to her and her story. And I think as a woman, I always kind of say certain things like this kind of need to come to light for people to understand the certain things that we deal with on a daily basis, the daily paranoia that comes through, where we have to watch where we're going, how we're moving, and things like that. Part of the reason why we also brought Zamo through for the episode is to kind of shed light with regards to how people deal with these certain things, how the trauma kind of happens, and also speaking from a male perspective. I feel as though the conversation has always been led by the females, so I thought it's very important for us to actually have the guys kind of attack this conversation and where they get involved as well. What also kind of transpired on the timeline was the certain Twitter accounts that came through as well, the likes of MINext_SA as well as Help Survivors. And on those two accounts, a bunch of people were also named as possible abusers or accused of certain behavior towards the females. And two of the names, the accused, are also sitting with me here. Scoop and Speedy were also named on those social media platforms. So we're going to give them an opportunity for them to kind of speak on their behalf. But over and above that, I think also just to kind of involve Zamo in the conversation to make everybody understand why it's so important for guys to get involved to actually stop this behavior. Because I don't think men really understand what certain things can kind of lead to a person feeling violated. So we'll get into that as well. So guys, the timeline obviously named the two of you as possible abusers or certain situations that came through. Speedy, I know you also dropped a statement,
Yeah.
but you later removed that.
Yeah,
Why did you remove it, and what can you kind of actually speak on with regards to that situation?
I think firstly, it was really embarrassing. First of all, and I think for me, the what irritated me the most about the whole thing is the fact that there's a real issue going on. Like as you mentioned, it's been really, really intense. There is something we really, really need to pay attention to, especially with the ladies. So it sucks that Twitter becomes a place where people can just throw things and say things, because I feel like there needs to be real action. You know what I mean? Especially with that page, with us being named and shamed, it's like, okay, cool, but after tweeting, are you going to the police station? Are you actually doing something about it, or are you just tweeting? So I think for me the most irritating thing is that we clearly need help. We clearly need to be working towards something, towards fixing this issue. So it sucks that people aren't taking it seriously, because that's how I perceive it. It's like this thing is not being taken seriously. They're taking the piss out of it, which sucks for me. So it was there. What's done is done. I can confirm that all of those allegations that were made against me, and not even it happened, but it happened in a different way. They are untrue, all of them. Like I said in my statement, if the person does feel otherwise, please, please go to the police. Please, do something about it, because I don't want to go around walking in the streets trying to be sort of a role model or a mentor to young boys who look up to me, and then you have to hear things like this, and if I did do a crime, then I'll go to the police. You know what I mean? That's the kind of a person I am. So it sucks, but it's happened, like I said. So if you're watching and you feel that way, please go to the police. Let's actually do something about it.
Scoop, what are your thoughts as well? Because you didn't send out a press release, but rather kind of waited for maybe an opportunity to come back and dive into things.
Yeah, I did think about doing that, and then I didn't, because one, I thought you guys were going to shoot the podcast without me here. So I was gonna shoot the press release because I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't want it to seem like I was running away from addressing anything. And then I thought to myself, since we hadn't shot, let me come back and address it in person. I was really shocked at that. I have never and will never, and I've been very vocal about how I feel women should be treated and have to be treated. For me, more than, I think a lot of people think about it as losing money, losing all these things and opportunities. I feel like nothing that was meant for me will be lost because of something like this. I do understand what has happened. My whole embarrassment and hurt comes for my family, my mom, my sisters. Those are the people that I really feel like in this untrueness have been let down. That account also has furthermore released a statement after all the damage has been done, saying that they're really wary about some of the stories that they've had. They've gone on to delete this account, and for me that was
suspended more than
was suspended. So things like that, no one really looks at that part of it now, but the stigma of your name being on that list is still there. I know Les also issued a statement, and personally I was never going to spend money and time trying to prove my innocence. Had someone gone to the court, definitely then that will be taking place. But with that said as well, I didn't see it wrong that some of my brothers were like, yo, I'm gonna go to court and sue for defamation of character. I don't have the money or the time for that, to be honest. So I only can show what I am, and I only can be what I am, and time will tell it. All the cliches have to come into here, but I'm really sorry for anybody who saw that. I'm really sorry for what the women are going through in this country. And from a personal point of view, I was disappointed to see my name in there, and I assure anybody that there's no truth to whatever that person said.
I don't know, sometimes it's kind of weird, I think, for women and for girls especially, because if you read a lot of the stories, you hear a lot of them are happening in club settings or drinking sessions or going to people's house parties or whatever the case is. There's alcohol involved. Most of the stories kind of came through on that kind of platform. And obviously, with us being in the entertainment industry, we always find ourselves drinking and maybe going to somebody's house. Maybe we might get a little flirtatious. Do you guys feel at some point maybe you don't really read the signs correctly? You might feel like you're flirting, but then maybe that person's kind of maybe feeling a bit uncomfortable. So certain things like that can kind of escalate into a person being like, oh my gosh, Speedy made me feel so uncomfortable. I don't want to speak to him anymore. But you don't really see how far that kind of went.
That does happen. I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure it's happened to all of us. And in that situation, that's you can gauge. I mean, you can feel when something is not right, especially if you're trying to do something with somebody, and that's when you stop, and that's how it's always been for me.
Yeah.
And that's where it stops. So it sucks that my name has to be there, because for me it's always been like that. Like I've never forced myself on anybody. But what I can say is I am guilty of. I have seen certain things happen, and I can say I'm guilty for not doing anything there and there, because there's been numerous times where I've seen like bad behavior or things that are not supposed to be happening happen right in front of me, and I haven't taken action, and I apologize for that. I now know that it's important, and just the other day on Friday I was at a gig, and while I was DJing I saw this lady like fall on the floor, and I thought, what's happening here? And I was still DJing and no one was picking her up, and I was like, what's happening here? And then eventually a couple of my friends picked her up, and this lady was literally like passed out, like dying. And it turns out the owner of the place is her boyfriend, and he actually physically hit her. Like he actually physically connected her, and she fell. And I stopped the music because everybody carried on like nothing happened. And I think the saddest part was that when I stopped the music, there was a female DJ that said the party has to continue, and she played.
Wow.
And I said to her, I was like, what do you mean? And I left the establishment and I'll never go back there again. But I was speaking to my partner and I was like, what's actually happening? Are we trying to fix this? Because I feel like another thing that is happening is that we are sort of taking social media and Twitter to be the world. But are you actually reaching the people who are doing these things? Because this person did this thing, everybody around did nothing to him. Imagine what he does behind closed doors. But that person doesn't have Twitter. So when people are ranting and they're doing all these awareness things on the social media, is it actually reaching the people?
I definitely agree with you. And people did voice out the fact that these movements and these hashtags, do they really get to the people that it could have an effect on and are affected by it? That's one. On the other side, I'm like, no matter where these movements or hashtags go up, I think more awareness is a good thing, no matter on which platform it comes on. Because you never know, a hashtag might start on Twitter, and like most things, it bleeds into Facebook, then bleeds into natural life. So I'm all for the hashtags being out there on whichever platform they are on. The other thing about what you asked is, I personally am very sensitive about my relations with women. I'm a sensitive person, just personally, so I'm very aware of those things. Having grown up in a female household, having grown up in a household where my dad actually did physically abuse my mom, it was one thing that I was really, really wary about, to the point where even when a female is abusive to me, it's one thing that I talk about, you know, and it has happened in my past relationships. So I can safely say that there's no way that there was ever a gray area for me. Thirdly, another thing about South Africa is, if you look at what happened with the Babe situation, because everybody did speak on that, even I spoke on that, a lot of people spoke on that, and then the next thing you know, these people have 1 million+ views on a video and they're touring again and it's all love again. So yes, we should speak, and definitely let's do it. However, are we also aware that sometimes when we speak that we are hit with piss in the face?
But then,
And that makes it difficult.
where does the line come to draw? Yeah, I was about to bring in Zamo on that, because it's societal, I guess, where we all kind of sit back and say, I've seen that I am le. But when do we get involved? How do we kind of stop it? That's a good question. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I mean, I suppose I'm terrible at interrupting. It's an occupational hazard. So I've let this conversation go. It's really been helpful, for example, to see, and I'll show you what a few things happen. Like, I agree with you. Like, what's the point of speaking, right? And it's not just about the speech. It's about how we do it. So if we look at the transcript of this conversation that we've had for the last X amount of minutes, it's moved from the focus of the accusation, right, to an absolving of your accusation, so to speak, right? And naturally, right, nobody wants to be accused of anything, especially if they haven't done it or if there's inaccuracies to some extent. Though the speech must focus on the accusation in order for us to really get to the bottom of what's gone on, right? Not so much on, and I say this with due respect, not so much of I am a victim of having witnessed abuse myself and I've seen it, or somebody else victimized somebody else and I was powerful, though really to keep in the initial part that says people accused you and whatever, and I'll come back to the problem with accusation, or maybe let me just say it now. You see, the tricky thing is that it can be easy to accuse the two of you of something that did not happen, because it happens all the time. So in group analysis, what we know is that you might have, and I'm not saying that this is the case for those two individuals or X amount of individuals, I wasn't part of the timeline, though imagine that those people do experience some sort of assault, right? And it's micro. We know microaggressions, and I'll come back to the race issue. Though if you take microaggressions, the thing is they're so micro, it's very difficult to say that happened there, right? And then something is in an interaction between the two of you and somebody else, and all of those micros in investment get located and invested in you. if that makes sense. So it could be actually that it was not, in fact, in that interaction that has been spoken about, or it was not you. Though the collection of microaggressions has to go somewhere. And sometimes it can go into the two of you. Now, sometimes it can go to the two of you unfairly, or sometimes it can go into the two of you because of your own kind of unawareness of your perpetuation of microaggression, you know? Yeah. And it, you know, thinking I'll say it differently, and I'm introducing race here. It's, for example, like how as a person of color you experience racism all the time, and it takes one moment when you're at the till and a black person serves a white person first, where you're gonna locate all of what you've experienced in your day because you experienced racism for the time you wake up into that moment. And that moment is therefore a signifier of something that happens. Now, if that's a talk that we want to have, then we're going to get somewhere. It's going to be more than Twitter. It's going to be more than a timeline. Though we're really then going to get to understand this, what I think happens globally, what I think happens in South Africa, is that there is always a sense of perpetration.
I guess with this smoke, there's fire, kind of a vibe.
You know, and it may not be you, and it is always you. Both at the same time.
But then don't you think at some point it also becomes them with regards to them being in the situation of them triggering the microaggression? So not necessarily saying that they've done anything abusive or that they've done any rapey behavior, but just a simple touch in the wrong place, like maybe even if it's just a little bit too low down her back, kind of makes them feel a little bit uneasy. Either way, they've kind of contributed to that situation.
Yeah. And I think it's both. So I have two
So
points.
I think for the guys also kind of realizing where to touch, where not to touch, being careful of certain things. I don't know.
So Keanu Reeves became quite like popular recently. Keanu Reeves, because he doesn't, when he takes pictures, he doesn't touch anything. And that thing. Look, I think it's both. I want to make a second point. Let me make the first one. I think it's both. I think it's both in that moment. Sometimes you do, it is, and unwittingly sometimes, because of course, the horrible thing about masculinity is that you're brought up to do whatever you want, whenever and however, and there isn't always. It's like white privilege. It's like you can do whatever, and you're unaware of its offense, so to speak. However, I agree with you, and this is my earlier point. I think that it can also be symbolic. So it's not necessarily that you did something that was the absolute perpetration, though you triggered the reminder of that perpetration, and the buck stopped at
No,
that
for
point.
me, it wasn't a trigger. This girl, anonymous girl, went to this account and said that I raped her. This wasn't a trigger. So for me, I don't want it to be a gray area. I understand what you're talking about, and I'm fully about it. But I'm also not gonna be very wary about what I say, because that person and the accusation wasn't very wary about their words to me. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I don't want to act like now I'm too scared to say my truth because of that. Like, there was no gray area. There was no trigger in this person's accusation to me. So I can't be very honest about how I speak about what, you understand? And that's another problem. So now if a guy is like me, what do we say about that? Oh, he's being too aggressive in his innocence. Or but what do? Do we be Johnny Cochran and sit calmly and act like this doesn't bother us? Do we act like our past and the way we've been raised doesn't matter in the present situations, when it matters in everything else? Where we work, what we choose to do with our money when we work. Do you understand? Now we have to extract our past. So now being raised by 3 women and a mom who was abused doesn't play a role in me being very wary about women. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's very difficult. It's very difficult.
Look, and I think that it's really horrible because in reality, it's not helpful when accusations are kind of bandied around it. I think you were alluding to it, it dilutes the seriousness, the accuracy of it, you know. And then it's anti the cause. It actually does more damage to the cause.
I don't mind being a casualty of the war because I understand and I know we've had this conversation on the podcast so many times. Just a week before the situation happened, we had that sexual harassment talk, you know what I mean? And we really voiced our opinions out. And I know that men are vile and I know they're dogs. I do. And whenever they say men are trash, I really don't get sometimes when our brothers are like, no, not me. We're not talking about you that's not the trash. We're obviously talking about the ones that are. And we know very well that men need a lot of help right now in growing up. You know, I've had to go through my growing up and all of my ordeals, clean down the Ngoku. And for me, what also hurt me about that is I had been planning to do a mentorship school for young boys for a whole year. And the week I was supposed to take out my call to action to invite these kids, that story came out. So it did kind of hurt me. I waited a while, but that my mentorship program school is still out. But in the bigger scheme of things, it does hurt the innocent. But at the same time, the innocent need to be mature enough to know that you're being a casualty of war because of what all your brothers have done and for the times that you didn't speak. And I'm man enough to know that.
So, I know I'm interrupting, but I'll say one thing quickly before I think, when you were saying it does hurt the innocent, you know what I thought about? About what it must feel like to be a woman in the world.
Exactly. I was about to mention that as well, because you'll also find, as much as there were a lot of people named on those Twitter profiles, and there were a lot of people who came out and saying these allegations are false, whatever the case may be, there were also way too many repeat names. And there were also so many where people kind of sat back and said, yeah, but if sometimes when I'm in the club with this person, I do kind of feel a little uneasy, or maybe when he's had too much to drink, he does kind of touch me a little bit the wrong way. And it's little things like that where girls are like, but we're not going to absolve you, because if we absolve you, then we need to absolve everybody else. And at this point of the game, we're trying to rid of the problem as opposed to protect the problem. Do you understand? So that's why we're choosing to be a lot harsher now compared to in the past, because it's how long are we going to brush it under the carpet? How long are we going to leave these repeat offenders to continuously behave this way and act like they're innocent? Meanwhile, we know when we see them in the club, when we see them doing dirty things, it's like, he's up to his old tricks. We shouldn't allow that to happen.
I fully, and that's what I said the last time before this came out. I was like, I think if people spoke out, it would be better.
But that's the thing, people are speaking out now, and now it's, but I'm not guilty.
So can I just ask, in terms of like definitions of things, because I also think like sometimes people don't understand the definition of something they're saying. So can you maybe just elaborate what because sometimes you can say, maybe you're a student, you can say, that exam raped me, right? Can you maybe just what is the meaning of rape? Because I think a lot of the stories as well, they don't understand what they're saying, and words are just being like thrown out. So I personally also just want some clarity on like certain definitions, like what is the meaning of rape?
So I think that there are two important responses to that. The first one is, you're right. I think the definition of rape in South Africa is actually determined by law. It's legislated. And that type of violation is very particular. In a very strange way, because I've recently reread the law, it actually includes a whole lot of things. In terms of object, in terms of sexuality, gender, and all those things in a way. So I want to point to something else, and it's an additional point that you make, which is the importance not, and I've said this, not to dilute actually. Because in as much as you might be an activist wanting to call attention to something, there's a risk that it gets diluted. So put very differently, and I'm saying this with absolute respect, soon enough, what might happen with the accusation of rape might be what has happened with the accusation of racism. You're playing the race card. And then it no longer actually has the legitimacy that it has, right? All around, we need to be responsible in it, right? And there's nothing wrong in saying something happened. I'm not certain what it is yet. I haven't quite made sense of what it is. There was deep discomfort, there was non-acquiescence, there was maybe even confusion, maybe even regret, which is as a man, I feel really aware of even using that word in this conversation. Now, in that spectrum, you can say something happened, and we can deal with it as opposed to saying there was a rape. If that makes sense.
I got what you mean.
It makes me want to make then an additional point, which is...
Like, is it with regret? You mean like someone sleeping with someone and that lady afterwards feeling like, fuck, I shouldn't have done that?
I don't necessarily, okay, well, there's that situation, but then at that point, I think if there was consent, then you should own the fact that you did it, and it should rather be regret and not be called rape.
That's what I was asking. What does it mean by regret? What do you mean by regret?
I'll tell you what I mean. What I mean by regret, not in its entirety though, because I don't want us to get into a dangerous slippage. Is that there's something about informed consent, and consent, which is a very important thing that you're mentioning, has to be informed. Now, informed is not a once-off thing. Let's hang out. Let's make out. Let's have sex. It's a consistent thing, right? And I think that occasionally you might find yourself, because we've all kind of been in a contract where we consented to one thing, and then we find ourselves paying more for another, and there's that regret.
Got you. I got what you mean.
You know what I'm saying? Now it's a both end, right? I wish I had more information, as much as I wish I had informed me.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're speaking about consent, which is a different topic altogether, we can have a different conversation altogether. We're getting into all sorts of other really, really important things. I'm gonna come to because you were talking about the club. I'm gonna come to the club with you. I may not go home with you. I'm gonna come home with you. I may not have sex with you. I'm gonna have sex with you. I may not have, etc., etc. You know, and I know I'm obviously. Look, it's my gig. I do things mechanically. Like I'm mechanizing these really kind of. You know, you're not gonna stop at a point. So perhaps you should.
Yeah.
And that's a crazy thing to say.
I think that's the important thing is for both parties to take ownership of the situation, but also at certain points where it's also respect of the other person, because when there's respect, that's when you kind of realize, okay, this is getting a bit too far. Yes, I'll come with you to the club. Yes, we'll go home together. Yes, we'll kiss and we'll make out. But at some point, even if my top is off and I realize and I'm like, actually, I don't want to do this. You can't get angry at my stopping when my top is off.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where certain things become a little bit uncomfortable between the two parties, because it's like, oh, but you've got me here. You know, I've got a hard on now. You can't stop now. Yes, I can stop. Because I don't want to do this anymore.
100%.
Do you know what I mean? And I think
100%.
that's where aggression comes in. That's where the anger comes in, and situations come up. Like in this past couple of weeks, I've heard so many stories come out from girls that I know personally who've said, I found myself in this situation and now I can't look at that person the same way again. Something might not have happened as serious as rape, but the discomfort of a situation like that came up. And at that point in time, that person can't look at them anymore. And it's not to say that they were violated, but they were like, yo, he made me feel so uncomfortable, I can't.
I definitely understand that.
It's a real thing, right? And it's like the closest to put it is I'll do two things. The first one is like in a very theoretical way. It's called like being Kafka, where you find yourself in a moment and you haven't quite agreed to be there, though you're there and you begin to participate, right? And I think that's that experience. So the other way to put it is like, and I hate to introduce race all the time, but it's always there. It's like, how many times have you been in a situation with white people, and like you're now laughing at a joke that in your back of your mind you go, that's a little bit racist. Though you're in the moment, and like to be impolite will ruin it, it'll take away from something, and you go, you know what? Let me just laugh. Let me overlook it, right? Now that's much more benign. It hurts yourself, but it hurts your sense of self. It can happen equally with gender and sexuality, where you go, you know what? Let me just kiss this person because here we are. You know what? You know what? I thought I was not going to have sex, so let me just do it.
Yeah.
You know, and we all, because we're all victims of it, we can all relate to the moment where you make the call, though you did not make the call. The call made itself.
That's how most guys cheat.
That's another topic for another day. We'll talk about cheating on another podcast.
I do think like really like
I don't do that, babe.
So yeah.
Real talk.
Sorry, I want you. Though what I was trying to make is that what can be missed and what is, and thank goodness we can have this conversation because we can have the follow up, is like the nuances of no or the nuances of yes. There's a difference between yes and okay, and we've all been in a situation where we go, okay, right? Unfortunately, or fortunately, sometimes it does not cost us our sense of self the next day.
I definitely think like no matter how we cut the cake, that men really need to be more conscious of a lot of things, especially in the hip hop space, with the misogynistic lyrics that we have and the misogynistic spaces that we have. I really think we should be more conscious of everything that we do and what we say. And I've been advocating this for a long time, and I don't know how we're going to do that. I don't know how we're going to be able to match up what the visuals that these kids are getting, the music that these kids, because I'm telling you, and I have said this on Twitter, it plays a huge role. A huge role. And it's not just hip hop, because there's also the Mapiano lyrics that say what they say. And you've said this before. You know, when we were in Durban, someone said, yeah, but when you listen to this hip hop music, you get into a taxi, Durban people are very respectful and there's fuck bitch, hold this, that. And they blamed it on hip hop, and Cos said, but wait, Amapiano lyrics are just as vile, are just as sexual, you know? And because I don't listen to Amapiano, and because I understand what hip hop has done to my mind, and the way I've objectified women, and I've been very vocal about that, I really think as custodians of the culture that we have a very big role and very big letters to address. Definitely, I will own that, no doubt about it.
It's in the lyrics, it's also in the conversation. Similar to what Speedy had said about how you can use certain words and you don't realize how serious it is. Where you can sit back and say, yo, that exam raped me, but you don't realize you're talking in lingo like, oh, it was hard. But
and I've said it when I was talking about ambitious and MT.
Exactly.
I've said it.
And we had to bleep you because we needed you to realize how serious that word was. Do you understand?
For sure.
So it's all in our behaviors. It's all about ownership, I think, what's important for that. But also over and above that, I think the bigger conversation that came out from this week was also how men can get involved to absorb these things. Where does it start? Where does it end? I mean, it's a very task to kind of take on now. Especially because the situation is very serious. Also, not much can be, well, a lot can be done on social media, but I think more action needs to happen in society.
Shout out to DJ Frankie and Rockets. They've actually teamed up, and what they were doing throughout this whole weekend, they went and bought like 1 million pepper sprays, and they were giving all the females that were coming into the establishment.
Well, not 1 million, but yes, it was a couple.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like they taking action.
Like as a guy, I want to ask, do things like that help?
They do help because it makes us believe that you guys care.
Sure.
Because you must understand, as a female, as a victim of crime, not necessarily abuse, but as a victim of crime, I am now 100% paranoid everywhere I go. I've been smashed and grabbed, I've been mugged twice. So for me, I'm always wary about where I'm going, who's at my window, who's going to look at me. Every time I'm in the car, I'm always worried about who's coming. They might be doing something as innocent as trying to sell me flowers. But at that moment, I'm paranoid.
I feel you.
So now that comes in the same space as abusers, because if I'm out walking on the streets, I am paranoid as hell because who's going to snatch me? I stopped road running because I had an incident. I used to love road running. I did marathons. I did the Soweto Marathon, like I did the 21K so many times. I stopped road running because there was one day I was running down my street, and on my way back, I got a bit of a scare by these two construction workers who acted like they were going to come and grab me, and then they laughed it off and walked away. I was like, you guys can't do that. Look how small I am. You guys can easily and that's the end of me. That's how people go missing. Do you understand? So that's our fear daily, to say who's going to take me. Uyinene went to the post office, for crying out loud. She wasn't even dressed in a short skirt or short, or you know what I mean?
And that shit was horrible.
Yes.
Yo. And all the other stories we don't know.
So men need to get involved in helping protect us. That's the important thing for us as females. That's what we need.
Remember that actor got shot as well. I think it was Manga from Generations. Also in the,
yes, because he was stopping the guy with the dreads.
Yeah.
He got shot in
Soweto
somewhere. He was stopping a domestic violence shandies, and then they just kept him. Again, like, I won't lie, and I'll be honest about this. If I see someone getting beat up in the streets, even if I see two dudes fighting or someone getting robbed, I will walk past, guys. What am I supposed to do? I've got a 7-year-old, I've got a mom and sisters that I really feel like I'm looking after. What do you want me to do? Because as a human, I understand that this shit is wrong. But the other side of my brain is saying, do you want to be a victim? Do you want to have your son crying?
Wait, you're talking about crime. What if it's a female, like you're saying, like domestic violence? Or whatever?
That's what I'm saying. Like, what do I do?
You have to intervene.
And I understand you have to, right? I know my mind says I have to, but with those situations, it's very scary. And I'm not a big man.
It's not.
And I'm not the only one going through this. I'm just also trying to urge. Neighbors don't intervene, because I think if I had a collective, different.
But then how do we stop the trend of being too scared to intervene?
That's what I want to ask.
You've got a son. How do you teach him to be better for his generation?
That's in my having a son, I can only raise him better, right? And I can raise him with better morals and better values, which is why I also started the school. Way before this debacle happened, I saw where SA men were, the pits they were in. And because I'd taken such a long walk to my freedom, I was like, shit, I've got such great skills that I could impart on these young kids. And that's why I had to start the Mystery Scoop system. But this is me saying, I will not make a video, I will not do a hashtag, because I don't see the results. But what I can do is choose 10 or 15 kids for 8 months that I will inject things in, that I can then safely say, I am doing my part in creating a better society. And because obviously if I can do it for these kids that I don't have no relation to, you can only know that I'm doing twice as much and 3 times as much for my son. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's just like there were so many people doing these videos and these hashtags and these campaigns. And I'm like, right now, we really need every man to have a certain segment of society that they are imparting knowledge and time and energy in raising these kids, rather than looking good in campaigns. And it didn't take this for it to happen. We've been in this shit for a long time. Really, we have been in this shit. You know? And the time for leadership and looking at leadership and looking at women's league, apparently they didn't say nothing during this whole problem. You understand what I'm saying? That's a big thing.
But also, why are women always the ones having to speak? Why are women always the ones having to march? And you go to these marches, you go to these activations, it's always the women who woke up and they did the sentence shut down. It was females only. Where are the gentlemen? Every time we have a conversation, even on this podcast, it's always like, okay, Noni, this is your point. You have to now speak on behalf of the ladies. Why? Why can't you as a man have a view of understanding that I see my sisters, I see the people in my space, and I need to protect them. In order for me to protect them, I need to do something. Let me join in on the march. Let me say, like, action. Because you can, tweeting only goes to there, and then you send your data, and then that's it. Where's the action? Where's the participation?
So a men's march would have been also more
It feels
vital.
like you guys are sitting back.
Sure.
That's what it feels like.
This is it, right? You know, because and I agree with you. A men's march could have been one thing, and it would have been important. Though this is it. This is it. It's non signifying conversations where we're not. I mean, I suppose we are being seen to have this conversation, which is one thing. Though we're having the conversation, it is the one that is not going to be grammed. That is it. It's really kind of trying to understand, trying to get beyond the initial reactions, and trying to get into it. It makes me think about, for example, I mean, I think it's a great initiative that, there was work done around getting pepper sprays. Really, I do, because I think it's both. It is about trying to empower women. There's a second point that needs also to be done, because they need both, which is also about doing work with the men. So that initiative is great because it does something for women. Right? Though there needs to be then another one where men are given, I do not know what, though, in order to kind of like then invert the gaze unto themselves, that you too need to do something, because we've had it easy. Like in the last week, we could have done nothing and carried on. The women had to get pepper sprays. They had to wear black. They had to go march. That you cannot not do something. Though I think it's both, and one does not cancel the other one out. I'm not in the there's a risk now of saying that what happened with Frankie was really great, because it's saying I put my hand up, which is why I'm here. I had a conversation with Noni. I said I don't know if I should speak because I'm a guy.
Yeah. And I also said we should have more women.
Exactly, and we agreed that actually we should speak.
Yes, but that was my argument, and that's why I insisted on getting a male psychologist to come through, because I wanted you guys to also understand from a male's perspective how you're not having the conversation. Because it's always us as the females complaining, men are trash, men did this, men did that. If you look at the people missing on the timeline, it's females. it's women who are going missing. Children who are going missing, maybe it's the small little boys, but the vast adults who are going missing are women because we're not strong enough. How much more weaker do we have to be that we also have to stand up for ourselves over and above the fact that we're in this vulnerable position?
So I want to make a point a little bit earlier, and I know is that one of the ways that I framed what's happened is like a terrorism, right? So to go back to definitions, I don't want to necessarily do that. The point of terrorism is that it inserts in the other an experience of never being safe, never being able to do what you do. Because, for example, I'll give you an example, right? There's an experience, for example, in Iraq or in whatever, that they cannot just live life freely, creatively. So they bomb the US so that the people in the United States have that experience on a daily basis, and then they go, finally you get what I'm feeling like. Right? You finally get what I'm saying. So the point in that is too, is that in a strange way, I'm glad that a lot of men, when they were going through the timeline, got anxious, right? Myself included, actually. Because for a second, now this is what was missing. For a second, we got to feel what it is like to be a woman every second.
Sure.
Which is an anxiety of something happening, actually. Now, if somebody had followed it up, we would have really gotten it. The penny would have dropped. That's the point of a campaign like that. It's to make you uncomfortable. It's to unsettle you, because
I was waiting for my name.
Right.
All my boys were in there. I'm like, let's see how again.
Now that's terrorism. It gives you the sense of what the other person is going through. However, one last thing on terrorism is that what this attack did is that it was a terrorist attack to the sense that, can you see how it shook everybody? Right? And one of the reasons there are many reasons, though I'll point to one or two, is that you are being attacked not because of anything you have, but because of who you are. So in the same way as a terror attack is because you are Muslim, and so they come in and they shoot you, or you're Jewish and they come into a synagogue and shoot you, or you're American and they're gonna bomb you, or you're black, and you know. And the power of terrorism is that you cannot escape it, and it's ominous. It's not like you can say, I will not go to that place. It can be anywhere. And when in that cocktail, in that crazy cocktail, it really makes you crazy, because there's nothing you can do about it. It's who you are that you're going to be attacked, and it's not where you go or what you have. It's everywhere in a thing, and that's why it's reverberated across the country. And I think that's what's missing. A state of emergency is one thing. But if we call this what it is, that was a terror attack, because women all around South Africa are terrorized right now. They live in terror.
Can't even take an Uber. Can't even take it. Do you know how frightened we are? Because someone even mentioned this past week, where they said, now imagine I'm in a car with a strange man that I don't know, and he has the power to take me wherever he wants. He can child lock the back doors, so I can't get out. So if I sit in the back, I'm stuck. If I sit in the front, I'm in full view of him. Oh, sorry. But you know what I mean? Like, that's... Oh, no, there was no consent. I apologize.
I didn't want
I'm
to say
sorry
anything.
to Speedy's
You
girlfriend.
want to say reverse what? You see, guys.
What is my sister? Nah,
I apologize, Lucifer. But you know what I
But
mean?
you see, don't say that, because now it means niggas are family, they can touch.
No, they can't touch. But you see how uncomfortable you got the moment I touched him? That's how women feel every day.
Sure.
I'm someone you know, and you felt uncomfortable in that 2 seconds.
I've had
Now,
my
can you
penis
imagine? I'm
touched,
in an
I've had
Uber.
that.
I'm in the club. I'm on high alert 24/7. I had this chat with you as well, because you said, it's easier for you just to take Ubers. I'm like, I can't afford to take that risk.
And it hit me
I must
only
drive
then.
myself everywhere.
Even my girl, like, she'll go to work, I'll have the ride, she'll say, please come pick me up. I'm like, girl, take an Uber. She's like, no. And she would say no, and I didn't get to it. I was like, okay, I'll come. Only later when I asked her, like, why won't you take the Uber? And it was before the situations. And she was like, you don't understand. I've been robbed 3 times in Maboneng. They took my phone. 2 times they tried to take me in the car. And I just don't want to take Ubers because that fear still exists in me. And that's when I realized also again, like, damn, like, the situation is real. And she was like, I just didn't know how to tell you, you know? My sister was sexually harassed for the longest time, had to leave her job, had to work at another place. And she also took so long to tell the family. When we sent it to court, that dude still has his job today.
Because no one's protecting us.
I feel you.
You go in and you try and report something, the police are like, I go and fix your relationship. What relationship am I fixing if I'm here, I'm bumped and bruised, and you want me to go home and talk to my boyfriend? You want me to go and fix what? I'm the problem. You're telling me I'm the problem. We don't have opportunities to fix things. That's why women die in silence.
We need to be better, gents. We need to be better. I mean, I guess we could speak about this for days. You know, we could go in circles for days. We need to be better. You know, I'm going to try and use my influence, whatever you call it, my celebrityness, whatever, to say we need to be better. We really need to be better.
But it starts at home as well, because there's also this thing of cancel culture where, oh no, this person did this, let's cancel him, let's unfollow. What good is that doing, canceling a person, when that person hasn't learned the lesson? Are you canceling basically like if someone gets named for abusing, for instance, what happened to Mampincha, where everyone said don't listen to his music, don't follow him, don't support him. But then my thing is, what good is it canceling him if he hasn't learned the lesson?
It's about rehabilitation.
Should we cancel or should we try and fix? And that's what I'm saying, it starts at home, because a lot of your boys were named. Are you going in and having the conversation with your boys and saying, but bro?
I am.
Well, yeah, and it's both. You know, it's about having the conversation with the bros. It's about what you were saying about having the conversation with your kitty. You know, because in that moment when somebody's getting assaulted, you may not be able to intervene. You may in a way of doing something else. So it's probably not. Though the intervention is about like having these conversations with each other, having conversations with people who have been accused and that type of stuff. As opposed to cancel culture, I suppose. Look, I wanted to say one more thing in with regards to kind of near cancel culture stuff, which is, and again, kind of from a legal background, is that where the law fails is that it gives two outcomes. Somebody is either guilty or not. Now, the failure of that is that it doesn't recognize an intermediary position, which says that you did not mean to, though it happened. There's no VAR in life, unfortunately or fortunately. Though there's no point of saying you did not mean to be racist, though the other person took offense. And that other person's experience is valid. And equally, there's no intermediary, and this is where the law fails us, is that the accuser of, I think it was a spokesperson of the ANC or whatever, who said, I felt uncomfortable. The law said, no, that didn't happen. Now that's crazy making. Because for that person, it did. And it is, and that's part of where we also need to afford our efforts, is to get into a place like that says that this person did not mean to make you uncomfortable. However, you did feel uncomfortable. You were assaulted, you were offended, you were and I feel like that'll go a long way into changing things.
Okay.
Gentlemen,
Yes, ma'am.
we need to start having the conversations. You as gents need to have the conversations. You need to be the starting point of helping us fix the society. Because at the end of the day, we're the weaker ones who are still having to fight for ourselves, even though we're in a vulnerable position.
Got it, Cosmo.
Love you, man. I'll jump in front of the bullet for you.
I don't believe that, but okay.
For real.
Okay, we'll see if that happens.
I got all of you ladies.
Yeah.
No,
Thank you
for
so
real.
much to Zamo Mbele for joining us for
Thank
today.
you, sir.
Really,
Thank you, guys.
really
Jeez.
informative.
And that was free. Thank you.
No, English, yeah, offense.
Don't
You
send
guys
the
will be
invoice.
watching the show like this. What was that word? Ominous.
Don't say that we don't want the invoice, please. This is charity work. Much love.
All right, keep following us and please make sure that you check out our next episode. Keep on subscribing.
Thank you so
Skate
much.
all day. We're shooting at my skate shop next.
Wow.